All right. Hey, everybody. This is Cody Britton. I am your teacher for Current World Issues Semester 1. We're doing a live session here from Folly, West Michigan on my side. It's a balmy 40 degrees outside, so it's pretty chilly where I'm at, but we're almost to Halloween, so it's perfect weather. We're going to cover some stuff today that I hope will pique your interest a little bit. I tried to tie it into a little more real world application instead of looking for different skills. So hopefully when you go back through this, we'll find a little more relativity that we can use, and hopefully you can use this in your daily lives. This doesn't necessarily matter, but if we get more people joining in, I'll pop back and we can show you what the housekeeping rules are for me here. If you are a first-time listener to me here, I am motivated solely by talking, usually in my classroom in my brick and mortar school and here. So the more I get to talk and explain things to you, the better I think I'm doing. So ask me questions all the time. When we're in these kind of things, though, and we get more people in here, the important thing to remember is still just to be patient. There are no such thing as dumb questions. They're just questions. Be cool, and hopefully you learn something from it. So today we're going to talk a little bit about me, if we need to, if you don't know who I am. We'll spend 15 minutes about how we're going to apply some of these current issues that we deal with in our work when we're going through this course, and we're going to talk about how it kind of matters and why it's even relevant, right? We all wonder why we get to do what we do in class, but sometimes it's important to have someone just kind of explain it. So that's what I'm hoping to do for you a little bit, and then we'll have a why does this matter moment, and then we'll go over the assignment that we have here, 1.5.1. It's the summary of the Israeli and Palestinian conflict that's happening in the Middle East, and it's been happening for some time. The subheading is peace possible, which will matter quite a bit in your responses when you get to go over it yourselves. And then if we have more people pop up in the last 10 to 15, we'll have a Q&A. If we don't, this is going to be a pretty short video, so we'll get rocking. So current issues in your life. Feels like you're reading a Reader's Digest magazine, right? No. So the purpose of the course kind of, we want to make sure that students are taking something that they're reading or hearing about, right? And they're trying to kind of put it in a place and time, put it into context, explain why it matters, right? And we forget a lot of times that something that might be happening on the other side of the world really might directly affect us in a way that we're not really aware of, right? Now, when I say that, I don't mean that because someone got in a car accident in China, that means that our lives are going to be different. But the bigger picture items, right, the things that affect government, the things that affect our economy, our weather, and all of these things, a lot of these things really are connected, right? We're all relatively interconnected, even though the world is as big as it is. So when I try to teach current events and current issues, and even this course as well, I try to stress it that even though they might not be relevant to you, they're current to all of us, right? Something happening to the earth on the other side of the planet from where you are is still happening to the same earth that you're on, right? And so the big thing to remember with this a lot of times too is that the whole world really is connected, right? And when you think about this, right, it's not, oh, we're all human. No, it's not that. It's more we're connected in so many other ways than that, right? Social media obviously is a huge one, right? You can send a tweet to somebody in a different country in seconds, and they can receive it in seconds and respond right back to you, right? Whereas before it used to take literal days, weeks even, right, to have things mailed or sent to each other. So, I think we take for granted that convenience of access. And now that we have this access available to us 24/7, right, it shows just how interconnected the world is. I'm a big news guy, so I constantly have different apps on my phone all the time that are kind of ringing me in as to what's going on around the world. And it's incredible to me that I can just flip through a different section and learn about things that are happening in places like Ghana. I can learn about things that are happening in places like Uzbekistan, all of these different parts of the world that, I may never go to. I am hopeful that I'll be able to travel a lot more than I do, but, if you don't think that you'll ever go to these places, it's still super cool to kind of understand, hey, I wonder what's going on over there. I wonder how people over there feel about this thing, right? And it gives you a little bit of a better view of how people operate. And then, a lot of times you can compare it to yourself and then realize, you know what, maybe we're all really not that different. Going into what tools that we use to be connected, right? We talked about social media. Internet is obviously a huge one, right? But We also use things that are relevant to all of us, right? We have access to a government system that is designed to protect us. Now that looks different in every other country, but we have those kind of things that we can, we can kind of draw on, right? We have public resources. We have public buildings. A lot of us have schools and they have access to things like that. Education is another one too. And all of these things really kind of show that, while it might look different or it might not be relevant to you on your side of the planet and somewhere else, it might really kind of be the same thing. And so hearing that and seeing that and understanding that we're all kind of, sharing this big globe, right? It's important. So when you read through a lot of the assignments in this class, I'm hoping that you can look at something and kind of put yourselves in someone else's shoes, right? Explain, especially with this assignment. This assignment really challenges you guys to think about what you would do in this situation, right? There was that, what does that show? What would you do all the time, right? It's the same idea. You hear about this one in particular is a particular group of people have been wronged, right? And it's about a response to that. And I think it's really important to think about us as family members, as humans, right? Some of you are parents, like all of those things that matter. So when you get through those assignments, really think about how this can be applicable for you. All right, cool. So how does this affect you, right? Why does a trade issue in China affect the United States and its economy? Well, going back to this connection issue, right? We can look under a lot of things that we own in our homes, right? And it'll say made in China. And we like to joke and say, oh, everything is made in China, when really it is. But on the same hand, though, there's kind of a reasoning for that, right? Places like China, right? We rely so heavily on them for trade and for goods and things like that. So when you look at the current state of affairs, right? Maybe you've heard about our president talking about different issues with China, tariffs and taxes and all this stuff. And when you hear it on the news, if you're not a news person or you don't care about this stuff, you might think, nah, what does this have to do with me, right? But understanding that if someone taxes something that you buy from a foreign country, right, that makes the price of this good go up. And so while you might go to the store, this time of year and start buying Christmas presents for your kids, for your brothers, for your parents, whatever you choose, understanding that maybe the price of these things might go up because, we do have some kind of issues with trading with some other countries, right? And while it's strange to think that millions and billions and trillions of dollars of disagreement worth, right, from between two countries might affect you, a $25 toy might become a $30 toy. And it's those little small changes that I think, really, really kind of impact how a lot of our economies and a lot of our things work together, right? And this isn't to say that anytime there's a disagreement, we're going to feel the heat, but if the United States is involved with something, right, it might affect you in some way, shape, or form. Now that effect might be really small and barely noticed, but it's still an effect, right? And the more you kind of are able to kind of put that into perspective and understand, like, hey, this does matter. It might not be the most important thing in your lives, but just knowing that, it does matter a little bit. That's kind of the big thing that I want people to get out of these assignments when you do them, right? Let's look at some other things that might affect you, right? If you say you're watching the news or you're reading something and you hear about a world leader that's assassinated in a foreign country, right? A tragedy. A leader is killed, right? And you think, well, geez, this country is a complete ocean away. Why does this matter to me at all, And then you have to start thinking about it a little bit differently, right? How do I know who this person is? Right? You might not. All right. Well, how do people know who this person is? And then you start getting a little bit more of the story, right? Well, what about other countries? How do they view this guy, right? And maybe this is a person who has a really good relationship with somebody like the United States. Okay. Now, with this person being gone, what happens now, right? Say we're trading with a nation and the person that we agree to make trades with, he's tragically killed. And if he's not there anymore, you're left thinking, hey, I wonder what happens now, right? And so something like an assassination or like a major event like that can really play a role, and maybe, like I said, not directly into your lives, but it might change some things, right? It might change the price of something. It might change how traveling to certain places might look, right? All of these things really kind of have a ripple effect when they start happening like that. So I guess I want you thinking about whenever you hear about these events, right? Like I said, bringing them more to a human aspect and trying to just think how you kind of add up into all of this, right? Sharing a planet with 8 billion people and understanding that one person dying or one person becoming president or one person, getting in trouble or vice versa, all of these other things, how it kind of plays into your basket a little bit. So I like to do little checks, so you'll see, is this making sense, or do you have any questions periodically? So, because sometimes I'll get talking too much, get on my tangents. My freshmen at high school, they love it. So, let's see what else we got here. All right. So, why care about the world? I get so many students all of the time that say, Mr. B, why does this matter? When am I ever going to use this, right? Age old question. Why should I care about something that's happening somewhere else, right? And the way that I always like to explain it is the world kind of operates like a wheel or like a machine of some kind, right? And it only works if we're all kind of active and on board at the same time. Now, all of us might have different agendas. Nations might have different agendas. All of us have different roles in our day-to-day, right? All of us have different jobs and ways that we are relevant to the people and environments around us. But it requires someone to either work together or work against each other, right? And all of this kind of keeps this machine going, right? Because all nations and all people just stopped, right? The purpose of what the world is doing would really kind of disintegrate right away, because if you don't care about the world and you don't care about how these kind of things play into your lives on a daily basis, right? Little things like little changes and things like that, they all matter so much, right? And we run into this every time when we get closer to voting cycles and things like that, right? So shameless plug here, for voting all the time, right? Everyone's always going to say it in the next few weeks. You're going to hear about vote, vote, vote. So, I mean, and I think when we do current issues in class, like it shows why people decide that voting is super important to them. So when you think about what the United or what not, well, I shouldn't say that. What the world really needs in order to be successful, right, is it needs to have everyone on board, everyone on deck. And where it doesn't work out is when people start kind of going against the grain a little bit. But understanding though that even though your part might be small in the world, you still really do play a huge role to somebody or to something around you. Okay. I always like to say this in class too, everything affects everything. And my students are always like, what are you saying? So a decision you made 10 years ago to do something and go somewhere instead of going somewhere else might have changed everything that you've done, right? And it's weird when you think about that, phone calls, maybe if you're unfortunately in a situation where someone has died or something, right? You think about the last things you said to this person or what you could have done different, all of these things, right? Understanding that every little thing matters, every little thing that you decide to do and every little thing that you experience in your life and around the world and what happens to other people around the world, right? All of this is related. It affects something, right? So, and I think too, it's always to get you all feeling kumbaya here, right? We're all connected. Everything that we do matters to somebody somewhere. And we can learn so much from each other based on our actions and based on what's going on in the world, so that we can have a little bit more open worldview and we can be more accepting of others, right? And we can change our priorities for better things, and we can make sure, I guess, that we're leaving the world a better place than when we found it, right? So there's my there's my life-changing speech there for you about this. Let's take a break. If there was more people, we would be taking a break for sure, but I don't need a break. I've been teaching all day, so why stop now? If you have any questions at this point about anything that I covered earlier or any other thoughts that you have about this, when you get to this part of the video, write something down and shoot me an email later. Anything else you want to talk about or whatever, I'm an open book, and I love to have conversations with you guys about this kind of thing, because I think it's super important to learn one about your worlds and understand what makes you guys tick, and I think it's super cool to learn about other people in general. So if you get to this part and you're a little unsure about something or you want to ask me more, we can have that conversation. So don't be shy. All right, let's talk about activity 1.5.1. All right, is peace possible? So every single time that I do a live session, I really like to talk about why the assignment matters, right? I said this a little bit earlier. Am I going to use this? Why is this relevant? What does it do? And this is a really touchy subject for a lot of people because people around the world have a lot of preconceived notions about the Middle East. And when I say that, right, we think about stereotypes, right? People might say unfortunate things about people that are Muslims or Jews or other things like that because their history is a little bit smattered with some violence. And, you know, we tend to think that sometimes, unfortunately, you know, people are the way they are based on the action of a few, right? And then it takes a little bit of a grounding moment when we all come back to that, right? And we're like, no, that's just not true, right? So this assignment matters because you get to learn about what this conflict is about, and it's serious. It's a very legitimate one. I love reading people's thoughts on this. I also think it's important too because you get to understand why it matters and why it matters to you. And then you get to kind of think about both sides of this coin. And you get to sit there and say, hey, you know, I think I side with one or the other, or I side with both, or I think both are wrong, or I think both are right, you know, and this one always gets people thinking. So I'm going to try and break this down because this is something that unfortunately goes back thousands of years, right? And where it gets tricky is, you know, perspective is everything with history, right? We got to make sure that we're thinking in the shoes of people that are there and not from the shoes of people that don't know what it's like, right? We got to try and really put ourselves in this spot. So I'm going to explain this. If I do a poor job of it, please send me an email and let me know. But we'll get rocking here. So the assignment itself asks for two things, right? Two paragraphs. I put P1 and P2 here. The first paragraph that you get, you're supposed to include a summary of the issue from both the Palestinian and the Israeli side, right? So up until this point, you would have done the 4 sides for each, or the 4 points from each, sorry. And then you would have looked at some kind of source from the Scholastic site that explains some firsthand accounts of how people are feeling about this issue and how necessarily they want it to go. So you would have already had a little bit of access to this at this point. So the idea now that this is the summation, right? This is you putting it together and saying, I understand now. I understand what this is. And that's what paragraph 2 is for, where you will start looking at this and saying, okay, I have some possible solutions that I would like to offer. And I think that this is something that I feel about this, right? And you might agree, you might disagree, you might be neutral on this, on the topic. That's okay too. But this assignment really challenges you to take a side, take an opinion, and kind of start really kind of rifling your way through it. So when you do get to this point, please take it seriously. It is something that affects a lot of people's lives. And while you might think that this is on the other part of the world and I shouldn't care about it, you really should. It's super important. All right, so I gave you a nice little fancy map here, okay? So here's what's going on. This big area you see here, right? This all used to be Palestine, okay? And then what ended up happening was there was a lot of Jews that came in from different parts of Europe. They were escaping persecution, right? And now what's important to know is what's happening outside of this map area, okay? Things like the Holocaust, right? When Hitler was doing his thing in Middle Europe, right, and taking over all of it, this idea, right, that this guy was saying that you are a certain religion and you need to go, right, this scared a lot of people. And so these people became refugees and left, okay? And a lot of other areas, right, where different religions were persecuting each other, right, Christians, Muslims, all of these people were pushing these Jews out, and so they were going to different places, right? So they end up here, okay? They end up in Palestine. So it's important to know that this is Palestine first. And then as time goes on and more Jewish refugees keep coming in, right, what ends up happening is the Palestinians that are there, they start getting a little bit annoyed with the fact that these people keep coming into their place, which I totally understand, right? If this is your homeland and all of a sudden, you know, more people are moving in and moving in and moving in, right? Some people really have to consider if they want to stay because the culture might be changing, right? Their views might be changing, the way that they are interacting with people, right? If there's violence of any kind. And a lot of people felt like maybe there was some unrest. And so eventually what ends up happening is this place becomes Israel, okay? But where this gets a little bit tricky is the Palestinians who don't want to leave their country, which is all of this, right? They start getting put into these smaller areas, okay? And so what you see here, right, the screen on the map, this is kind of where the Palestinians are at. The rest are all of the replaced Israelis that came in here, right? So now the rest of this country is called Israel, okay? And what ends up happening here then is all of the Palestinians end up here in the West Bank or down here in this place called Gaza. It's called the Gaza Strip. And then the West Bank is an area over here. Lots of contention and lots of violence in this area, okay? There is a lot. And to make matters worse for a lot of these people, right, there is Israeli settlements in here too. So there's people that are still living amongst the Palestinians, and you can see where the color kind of breaks, right, where these people get to still kind of be. But at first, you're already going to be thinking, how on earth is it fair for these Palestinians to all of a sudden not feel welcome in their home and then they have to leave? And how is it fair for these Jews to come in and do all of this, right? And I think it's important to note that everyone was running from something, right? We run into refugees a lot when we talk about immigration and things. And so that's kind of what was going on right here. These refugees were running from something, and this was the best place for them to go. And so now you need to think about it. Put it together. How is Israel going to feel, right? So now that they can't decide on who's the authority, right, who's in charge, and it's a little bit tricky now, like Israel's going to feel like they're being attacked even more again, right? Because they finally go somewhere where they can be respected, but now they're going to sit there and say, well, geez, now we push these people out and they're being mean to us too, which again, can you blame them? But now Palestine, right? They're going to feel a little bit worse too. Maybe they're going to feel violent. Maybe they're going to feel like, we'd like to share this land with you, but you came in and took over, right? And so what's going to be really tough is you need to look at the source that's provided in the other sections and things that you've done, and kind of read through those firsthand accounts and try to put yourselves in those shoes and understand, hey, this is why someone might feel this way about this. I think it's incredibly important to try to humanize this, to understand that, maybe these people are justified in feeling that the way that they do, right? And so I think what's hard about this is there is no right answer here, okay? You can try and justify both sides, but I really think you're going to have a hard time coming to a general consensus. And I even do with this all the time too. I'm constantly reading about it, right? There's plenty of other sources you can learn about, but what you need to do here is kind of put it together and start thinking about how each side might feel. So to kind of give you a little bit more of a background on this, Palestine and Israel want the same place, okay? They want this capital called Jerusalem, which we'll flip back. Jerusalem is literally down here, okay? Which is why you can see Palestinians surrounding it and why you can see the rest of the Israeli areas right here, okay? They're all surrounding it because they all value it. Now your question is going to be why, right? Both sides think it's a holy site, right? Israel thinks the Israelis, right? The Israeli Jews think that it's a holy site, and the Palestinians, who are both actually they're Muslims, they're Christians, they're Jewish people as well. They all say that it's a holy site too. Okay, and where this gets tricky is neither side can decide who should be in charge of this area, right? Because one side thinks that it should be available for all religions, and the other side believes it should be a Jewish settlement, right? And so it's hard when you hear that because you're thinking, well, geez, they're all fighting for the same thing, but it's just worded a little bit different. And we've all been in those situations, right? Where you're arguing with somebody and then you're saying the exact same thing and then you're getting heated. And then you realize, wait, are we on the same side, right? It's kind of what this sounds like a lot of times when I go through it. But the big thing is people are unsure about who should be in charge, but both sides really do want peace. They don't want this violence to keep up. Some possible solutions now. This is paragraph 2, where you're going to start talking about what to do here, okay? So currently Palestine isn't really a thing. It's more of just this place called the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. Oh, what do we got? Let's see. Hey, Leah. We are just talking about, where is it? 1.5.1 right now. The summary one, checking if peace is possible. Where am I? There we are. Uh-oh. Yeah, we're good. Let's see. Okay. Sorry, I lost my train of thought there a little bit. So Aaliyah, just to catch you back up, we were talking about the two different paragraphs that you have to write. Cool. Como estás? Nice. My wife is a Spanish teacher, so I am learning Spanish as I go. It's been a hard road. I'm not great at it. But anyways, we were talking about the activity 1.5.1, talking about the summary of whether or not peace is possible between the Palestinian people and the Israelis. And I kind of want to just kind of go over, just so you're all on the same page here too, the two paragraphs that you have to do. The first one talks about the summary of the issue from both the Palestinian and Israeli sides. And then paragraph 2 is where you start kind of coming in and talking about possible solutions. So I left off talking about this. So paragraph 1 is where you kind of start putting it together and picking your sides. And then paragraph 2 is where you come in here and you start talking about possible solutions, right? Creating multiple states, or should they all kind of bind together, right? Because if you go back to the map here, where is it? Right here. You can see that Israel and then this Palestinian area are separate, right? And the big argument here is, should they all become one big massive place or should they not? Both sides have arguments for and against. When you look through the link in 1.4.1, I think it is, you'll see that they have the multiple sides there that you can look through and try and kind of understand as well why both sides might feel that way. And these are some of the primer questions that I want you guys thinking about when you go through this. Should they create two states? Should they bind together and create one large state? Who should be in charge? Should it be an Israeli person? Should it be a Palestinian? We run into some issues too about land. Whose land really is it? Even though I told you that it was Palestinians before, is it really? And then finally, I want you thinking about too, if peace is even possible during this point, right? So that's important to see as well. What else do we got here? Oh, part 2. Part 2 continued. The source that's provided that is in the earlier one, it's a Scholastic link, I believe. And what's really, really nice about it is it really helps students kind of get, I guess, put into the shoes of the people that live there, and they get to see all of these things. And you know, some people have some pretty tough views about it. Some people really dislike the other side, and they think that, you know, these people are coming in and stealing their land. Other people are just saying, I'm not even sure why we're fighting. Why are we wasting our time with this? But when you do paragraph 2 yourself, I want you thinking about what would you suggest. And also think about too, you know, which side really kind of gives the most convincing argument. Like I said before, you're not going to really have a right or wrong answer here. You're just going to kind of explain what you think is the best course of action, which I think is very legitimate too for something like this, because what's really hard is to put yourself in that situation, because if you live in the United States, you really don't have this kind of issue. So think a little bit more about that as well, whether or not peace is possible. And what's our last one? Tips to succeed. Oh, that's going to bug me. Hold on, let me fix this. There we go. Whenever you're writing this, I always suggest to students that you need to write what you're feeling, right? Make sure that you're really kind of communicating, connecting with the material, and also kind of make sure that you're covering all bases here. It's okay to have a strong opinion about it. I have students all the time that will write something and then they'll send me an email or a text or something and say like they apologize for what they've said in the comment section or things like that. And I always caution students, like, you know, obviously don't be disparaging or violent or mean, but definitely be honest and being able to explain like, hey, like I disagree with this because blank, like that's a really, really powerful statement to make. Because one, it shows me that you understand what's going on. And two, it's you actually taking a side. And I think that's really important. Make sure when you do this too, you're writing the full required length. It's 2 paragraphs. And paragraphs are always subjective depending on subject. When I was in middle school, it was 5 to 6 sentences. When I got to high school, it was 10 to 12. It's up to you. Just make sure that you're writing full-length paragraphs. Look over both sides really carefully as well, right? Make sure that you're really kind of understanding both sides and you haven't already gone in from a side that's already biased or preconceived, right? I cannot stress enough the making sure that you're being fair part, right? That's super important to think about. And understanding too that if you're not being fair with it, then you're probably not going to give a very unbiased opinion. You're probably going to already have a preconceived view of it, and you're gonna probably be a little bit judgy about it. So do we have any questions? Does Aaliyah have any questions for me? I know you kind of missed the early part, but I can hang around for 10 more minutes or something if you haven't. Nope. All right. She has spoken. Sounds good to me.